She was 8 years old, wearing a paper crown, standing at her own birthday table, and her grandmother handed her a plain cupcake while every other child got a slice of the cake with her name on it. Then, from the corner of the room, a 92-year-old woman slowly stood up, and what she said next changed everything. My daughter Emily had been talking about this birthday for weeks. Every single morning before school, she'd bring it up. The cake specifically, 3 layers, pink frosting, fresh strawberries on top, her name written in cursive right across the middle. I'd spent 2 evenings getting it exactly right. The day finally arrived. The house was exactly what a birthday party should feel like. Kids running through every hallway, wrapping paper already scattered across the floor. Parents chatting in corners with cups of coffee. Emily was in the middle of all of it, laughing, chasing her friends, completely in her element. When the moment came to bring out the cake, the whole room gathered. Phones came out. Kids started crowding the table. Emily stood at the front, paper crown slightly crooked on her head, eyes locked on those candles. She made her wish. She blew them all out in one breath. The room erupted. I started cutting slices and passing them to the kids. It was loud and chaotic and exactly how it should have been. That's when my mother-in-law, Karen, walked over and took the knife from my hand. She said she'd help. The table was crowded, so I stepped aside and let her take over. Karen handed out the next few slices, thick pieces, generous frosting. The kids grabbed their plates and scattered. Then she reached Emily. Instead of cutting from the cake, Karen reached into a small bakery box she'd brought with her and pulled out a single cupcake, plain, no decoration, no frosting swirls, just a small bare cupcake in a paper wrapper. She set it in front of my daughter. Every other child at that party had a slice of Emily's birthday cake. Emily had a cupcake. My daughter stared at it. She didn't say anything. She just looked down at the table. Then Karen said it, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Some kids need to earn their treats. The room didn't go quiet immediately, but the people closest to us heard it. I saw a few faces shift. I saw a mom near the couch glance over, and I saw Emily's expression. That small, particular kind of hurt that children carry when they're trying very hard not to show it. I wish I could say this was shocking, but it wasn't. Not really. This had been the pattern for years. Karen adored the other grandchildren, the ones from Ethan's sister Laura's side. She bought them expensive gifts, praised every drawing they made, told anyone who would listen how talented they were. With Emily, it was something else entirely, a comment about her clothes, a correction about her grades, a subtle remark about the way she spoke. For a long time, I told myself I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive, too protective. But children notice things adults pretend not to see. Emily had started noticing years ago. The incident Karen was apparently punishing her for had happened just the week before. Karen had visited the house and handed out gifts to Laura's kids right in front of Emily. When Emily quietly asked if there was something for her, Karen said no. Emily walked away without a scene. According to Karen, that made her rude. I opened my mouth to say something at the birthday table. I had the words ready, but before I could speak, a chair scraped slowly across the floor behind us. Everyone turned. Ethan's grandmother, Margaret, was standing up. She was 92. At family gatherings, she usually stayed in her chair near the corner of the room, watching everything, saying little. She'd always had a quiet kind of presence, the kind you respect without quite knowing why. But now she was walking, slowly and deliberately, straight toward the birthday table. She stopped beside Emily. She looked at the cupcake. Then she looked at Karen. The room had gone completely still. "Put the knife down," Margaret said. Karen frowned like she'd misheard. She was still holding the cake knife and server. I'm finishing the cake, she said. Margaret didn't move. Put the knife down. Karen set it on the table. Margaret looked at the cupcake again. She picked it up, held it for a moment, then set it aside. She took a clean plate from the stack, picked up the knife herself, and cut the largest slice from the cake, a thick piece loaded with frosting and strawberries, and placed it directly in front of Emily. Birthday girls get the first real slice. Karen wasn't done. Mum, that's not the point. Margaret looked at her. What point? She needs to learn that behavior has consequences. She was rude when we visited last week. She is 8. That's old enough to understand respect. Karen shot back. Margaret turned to Emily. Eat your cake. Emily nodded and picked up her fork. Karen looked around the room, probably registering for the first time that everyone was watching. This is exactly the problem, she said. You always defend her. No, Margaret said simply. I defend children. Laura chimed in from across the table. You're spoiling her. Margaret sat down next to Emily without responding right away. She watched the girl take a small, careful bite of cake. Then she spoke, and no one in that room was prepared for what came next. Good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was planning to talk about something today. Karen frowned. What are you talking about? Margaret looked around the room at the whole family. Slowly, deliberately, the way she did when she wanted everyone to understand that what she was about to say was not casual. I finished my will last week. The room shifted. Everyone in Ethan's family knew Margaret's situation. She'd never made a show of it. She wasn't that kind of person. But it was understood. She owned several rental buildings in town, a large piece of land that had quietly become extremely valuable over the decades. When anyone joked about it, she'd just smile and change the subject. So when those words landed, nobody spoke. Karen gave a short, uncomfortable laugh. Mom, this isn't the time for that. Margaret ignored her. She looked at Emily, still quietly eating at the table. Then she looked at the rest of the family. I made my decision. Laura straightened in her chair. Her kids sat beside her, frosting on their faces, oblivious. When I pass away, Margaret said, everything I own goes to Emily. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Then Laura said, wait, what? Karen's face changed completely. You're joking. No. Mom, you have 4 grandchildren. I know. Karen leaned forward. This doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense, Margaret said. Laura looked at Ethan. Did you know about this? He shook his head. No. The room cracked open after that. Parents started quietly pulling their kids away from the table. Laura's voice got louder. Karen's got harder. You're giving the house, the land, the buildings, all of it to one child. Yes, that's ridiculous. I made the decision carefully. Karen pointed at Emily. She's just a child. Yes, Margaret didn't flinch. She is. Laura pushed forward. So what about my kids? Margaret glanced at them briefly. They have parents who love them and support them. Karen's voice sharpened. And Emily doesn't. My name sat in the room for a moment. Then Margaret added something quiet and precise that made Karen's face go red. And someone needs to make sure this child grows up knowing she is valued. Karen shoved her chair back. This is unbelievable. You're dividing the family over a child who isn't even your favorite, Laura said. Margaret paused. Then she said, almost to herself, she is. That was when everything broke open at once. Karen, then Laura, then other voices overlapping. This is insane. You can't just pick one. What about fairness? The room erupting into the kind of argument that lives in families for decades. Ethan stepped in. Voices dropped. Karen pointed at Margaret. You've lost your mind. Margaret sat at the table like none of the noise could reach her. I made my decision months ago. You're destroying this family, Laura said. No, Margaret replied. I'm exposing it. Karen turned to me suddenly. This is your doing. Every face in the room swung toward me. You've been filling her head with stories about how badly Emily is treated. I haven't said anything, I said. Karen scoffed. You didn't have to. Margaret cut her off. Leave Luna out of this. But Karen kept going. You're turning Mom against her own family. Ethan stepped forward again. Stop. No, someone needs to say it. Karen pointed at Emily. That child is spoiled. Emily looked down, and that moment was when something shifted in Ethan's face. I had seen him annoyed before. This was different. Enough, he said. Then Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. She placed it on the table. Because it's not just a will, she said. It's the letter explaining exactly why none of you are getting anything. Nobody moved. Karen reached for the envelope. Margaret placed her hand over it first. No. Then why bring it? Because I want you to hear it. Margaret unfolded the paper slowly and began to read. For years, I watched how this family treats its children. Not equally, not kindly. I stayed quiet longer than I should have. Karen rolled her eyes. I watched gifts handed to some grandchildren, while others stood nearby, pretending it didn't hurt. I watched adults correct a child more often than they praised her. And today I watched a grandmother give a birthday cupcake to a child while every other guest received her cake. Oh, please, Karen snapped. Margaret lowered the paper and looked at her. You thought no one noticed? You're exaggerating. No, Margaret said. I am finally saying it out loud. She folded the letter again. I am leaving everything to Emily, because she is the only one in this family who has never expected anything from me. Karen's voice went cold and deliberate. If you go through with this, she said, you will never see your grandchildren again. Laura nodded beside her. None of you will come around anymore. Margaret looked at Emily, still quietly finishing her cake. She didn't panic. She didn't raise her voice. She just said, that won't be a problem. Karen frowned. What does that mean? Because Luna already promised me something today. Karen turned slowly. What promise? I didn't raise my voice either. I promised Margaret she would always be welcome in our home. She asked me earlier today if she could still see Emily if things got tense in the family. I told her she could come whenever she wanted. Karen laughed, short and disbelieving. So you've been planning this together? No, Margaret said. I asked a simple question. She gave me an honest answer. Karen pointed at Emily one last time. You really think this child is more important than the rest of your family? Margaret answered without a pause. No, I think kindness is more important. Karen grabbed her purse. Fine, this will not last. You'll regret this. Laura followed her out without another word. Within minutes, they were gone. The rest of the party wound down quietly. Parents gathered their kids. Decorations came down in near silence. The afternoon ended in a way none of us had expected. Before Margaret left that night, Emily hugged her. Thank you for the cake, she said. Margaret smiled. You're welcome. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. Karen and Laura called Ethan constantly. Angry messages, accusations, attempts to pull extended family to their side. The story being told in those calls was that we had manipulated an old woman, that we had poisoned her against her own family. What struck me most was that none of it had even taken effect yet. Margaret was alive and in good health. The will hadn't changed a single thing in their daily lives, but the resentment kept building anyway, which told me everything I needed to know about why it had started. One evening, after another escalating phone call, I sat with Ethan and said it plainly. I don't want them around Emily anymore. He didn't hesitate. And so I made the call. Karen and Laura no longer had access to my daughter. Not for visits, not for calls, not for any of it. Not now, not later. Emily doesn't fully understand what happened that day. She knows a kind old woman stood up for her at her own birthday party. She knows she got a real slice of her own cake. She knows she is valued, and that, more than any inheritance, more than any argument, more than any threat Karen could make on her way out the door, is the only thing that has ever mattered. Some kids don't need to earn their treats. They just need someone in the room willing to say so.